you. Our next speaker is Singh. I would like to invite him to the podium. I had an opportunity to meet him at the Parliament of World Religions.
I'm right here.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to meet him at the Parliament of World Religions last year, and it was amazing. He's a great storyteller, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy his talk. Just to give you a little brief introduction, he's chair of Wisdom Thinkers Network. He's an author, storyteller, educator, and community builder. Ralph believes stories have the power to change the world. His award-winning multicultural Stories to Light Our Way are used in public and private school, social emotional learning programs to honor diversity, nurture character, and deter bullying. Baba Virsa Singh Ji, where he lived for 6 years. Baba Virsa Singh Ji, where he lived for 6 years as Babaji's first foreign devotee, rising early to recite Naam, do part, and working in fields he lectured through. It's not continuing. Am I reading right?
I think they left out a few sentences.
Sorry about that. I think I will not. Lives with wife Joginder. He helped develop the early Sikh education and camp movement. Inner city langars campaigned against 84 abuses and helped bring Sikh community into interfaith movement. He speaks of the power of SGGS, Sri Guru Granth Sahib, to triumph the post 9/11 arson attack on Govind, southern USA, and brought to forgiveness, healing, and community building needed to this fractured world. We are honored to have you here, and we're looking forward to it.
It's my honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Waheguru Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ki Fateh. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
There's a balance between a mic and the phone and a mic and the mouth. While my tech advisors are setting up, I want to tell you what a great honor and privilege it is to be welcomed with such love. I think I have come to spend most of my time in what you might call the outside world, and coming back in the warm embrace of the Sikh community is a great pleasure. As a matter of fact, when I saw that I was heading on Gurdwara Road to Chudli Kala, I thought it was, as you in many cities have express toll roads to the airport, that this should be an express toll road to meet Maharaj. And so I congratulate you on being able to establish that for here. Because after all, we always say Gurdwara एक पावनी लायक 10वां द्वार दिखाया. So perhaps along that path we'll have some spiritual enlightenment to go along with it. Thank you all very much, and listen, my slides come later on, and I can I'm not gonna. You know, we're short of time, so basically I do say that stories have the power to change the world. Are you recording here or where?
Mike.
Yeah. So maybe,
Yeah.
So I do say that stories have the power to change the world. Not only that, but the stories we choose to tell. And the stories we choose to tell and how we choose to tell them literally determines the course of civilization. If we look back at our history, the story, the narrative provided by Granth Sahib, provided and not just provided, but imbued with Guru Gobind Singh Ji's words, Jin ki jaat ko paranmai sadare nabai kadai, in hi ko sadar banao tabe Gobind Singh naam kaho, sawa lakh se ek larao tabe Gobind Singh naam kaho, chidiya to main baaj karao, tabe Gobind Singh naam kaho. When you talk about a narrative, when you talk about the power of a story, we have more to lift us. And not just to lift us, but lift the entire world. And if only we would get out of our own way. The time I spend in Punjab are all over, and I'll end with a slide on this, but I'll still put it forth. I hear the lament. Sare leader te hai nahi, ਅਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਕਰੀਏ, ਸਾਡੇ ਲੀਡਰ ਖਰਾਬ ਨੇ, ਤੇ ਪਤਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਕੀ ਕਰੀਏ. I have one simple solution. We have the greatest leader in the universe. His name is Guru Gobind Singh. He is the 10th embodiment of Guru Nanak. There is no difference, and by taking Guru Gobind Singh's name, there is no difference between Guru Nanak Dev Ji, Guru Gobind Singh, and the eternal Guru, Sri Guru Granth Sahib. What more do we need? We need to commit to be asked the question, are we going to be worthy Sikhs or not? Not to spend time worrying about our leaders, but we are Sadari na pai kadai, e tarti sab teri sikhdari. He's given us, I don't want to use the word dominion, responsibility. We're caretakers. And so, my goodness, I have some pictures to go along with my story. It's a storybook, illustrated. So I want to start Prakash of Sri Guru Granth Sahib on this amazing handmade, hand-carved wooden tuck in Gobind Sudden. Whenever there's a Sri Guru Granth Sahib is not only elevated, it is elevated. And the whole sense, and I'm going to step back for a minute and say that for our work, I've already done that. I'm going to frame this story or this journey because we're talking about looking at a universal message. So my title was Building a World Without Walls, especially at a time when people seem to love their walls. Yes. I thought that talking about building a world without walls might be duly iconoclastic, because if there's one thing Indra knows well in terms of technology, we love to use the word disrupting, right? And the young people like to use the word disrupt. Well, if there's anything term to describe what our gurus do, they were the ultimate disruptors. They were the iconoclasts, the eternal iconoclasts, calling into question all practice. Why? Because basically, when we look at it, we have this identity crisis, where on one hand we want to say, look at us, we're a persecuted minority. On the other hand, the Nahangs are ready to say, and you read you read the Pangu's history, who's this one, this emperor who can give us a jagir? We don't want, give them back their sweets, give them back their silks. We don't want them. We're Azad, our Guru's given us everything. Who has the right to confer anything on us? And so we have this identity crisis, and these young people, I shouldn't even speak after them, they're so inspiring. But just to clarify, we're not separate. Jnana does not mean separate, it means distinguished. It means distinguished among. It means striving to distinguish ourselves in all our actions and starting with our character. In everything we do, we should be recognized. We're not worried, Savalakse Klaram, that's not this Manu Sade Datri Asi Uski Soy. We should not be harping on this identity which identifies ourselves as a persecuted minority, except I chaired a County Human Rights Commission for 10 years. I helped frame some issues on Sikh human rights violations, and they are human rights violations. But that should not, our nara, our identity. Those of you who are into branding and you're sitting in the midst of branding, how many people brand their company? We are not Apple. We are not Microsoft. Have you seen it? Does Google say, you know, we're not Apple? So why do we spend our time saying, Hum Hindu nahi? Let's go show what a Sikh is. I don't get it. What is going to pollute us? Nothing. Nothing is going to pollute us. I grew up in a Jewish family. Do you realize that Abraham was revered as the forefather and the patriarch of not just the Jews, the patriarchs of the Muslims and of the Christians, and not one of them would ever deny that Abraham is their patriarch, and yet they've killed each other. More killing going on in the name of the Jews and the Christians and the Muslims in modern history. I'm not going to challenge another group to top them, but they in their name, and yet not one. But somebody says that somebody takes Lord Ram's name to Hindu ho gaya kiton. Do you realize that love, the story, telling the story of love and Kush, and the beginning of the babies advance and the Saudi advance, what is wrong with that? What is it does not change you. How about those who don't like the fact, and how could Guru Gobind Singh Ji possibly praise Durga Mata? She is a Hindu goddess. Does anybody know Ardas? Please, raise your hand who knows Ardas. Do we do Ardas? Do you kids know Ardas? Would you start Ardas just quickly? How does it start? Come on. Okay. Do you know where that comes from? Does anybody know where that comes from? The first pori of Chandi Divar. So for those of you and everyone who wants to dismiss Dasam Granth and everything else and say it's this, it's that, or say that how could our gurus create an ode to those who they see as embodiments? Ki God Adante Kayavatara means that it's all one. It's all one. And so if they sing praises to all of those and tell us to love and respect, ki Ved Kate Ko Majutare, Ved, all the Veds, Simritis, Purans, Buddhist scriptures. Kate, people of the book, the Bible, the Torah. So if a Jew asks you, do you respect it? Yes. Does a Christian respect the Torah? Yes. It's all there. The Gurus are saying that the scripture, the revelations are true. Who is false are those who misinterpret the message, who want to politicize a message. And so I now got a bit ahead of myself and have used up a lot of my time. But let me frame this into saying if we're going to have a world without walls, we've got to figure out what walls we're going to bring. So I'm going to frame these in terms of 3 walls. The first wall which we have to deal with is our own ego. The second one is the walls between religions and within religions, which is sort of what I was talking to there. And the third are the walls between communities in the world. Is that fair enough? Does that make sense? so let me step back before I plunge into being an iconoclast and just share briefly my own story to help frame this. Because we always say, unless you have a purpose in life, and my definition of a purpose as a student was unless I have something that I love enough that I'm willing to die for it, my life really doesn't have meaning. And so for me it was a matter of, as we say, ki be prapt manak teoria, govind milan te e teri bariya, avar kaj teri kitna kam sad sang paj keval naam. And for me it was a little literal in act that I just prayed and wished. I knew truth existed, but I just hoped ki koi jan Parso Deve George, it's somewhere in the world. I didn't know whether it would be within a religion outside, but there had to be someone who was connected to God. Meaning truth, and this is where we miss it. There's a difference between spirituality and spiritual power. That unless there is an authority for truth in the world, it's not enough for me or you or even a group to stand up and speak truth to power. And the difference, for those of you who say there is no such thing as miracles, you obviously haven't studied religious history. It's not just the secret. Wherever God exists, if he sent a messenger, he empowered them. If you're the ambassador of such and such a country, and I include the United States in the such and such countries, then you act with the full authority of your country. And if you've come from Durga, then you act with the full, you've been empowered. You know, I'm coming from God. He sent me into the world with the power to overcome injustice and to stand to defend those in need. And so we should understand that nobody performs miracles. That's what we don't like. But these things just happen. When you recite Nam, Din Java, they're one. They're one. And so, in my case, I'm sitting, for those of you on the West Coast, I'm sitting outside of Columbia University's back gates in the upper west side of Manhattan over a simple cup of tea. Understand, I'd never seen a Sikh in my life. I didn't know there was such a religion that we know as Sikhism, such a tradition. In the blink of an eye, the room disappeared, my friend disappeared, and there was this remarkable being standing in front of me with a diamond-like light shining from his head, and his eyes literally held the universe. He just held up his hand and said, "Don't be afraid." Because in such a moment, you just don't know what happens. He drew me out through his eyes, toured me around the universe, made me feel he possessed all knowledge I could ever attain, and as a role model I could everything I would ever aspire to be. He brought me back, showed me something similar to an atom and said, "Meditate on this." It was gone. Now, if you were sitting in Starbucks having a cup of coffee with a friend, and Starbucks went away and your friend went away and you were not using legal marijuana at that time, I know that's what the first question I get. What was in your tea? I can assure you it was simple green Japanese tea. And I didn't have a special brand that we marketed after that either. So what would you say to your friend if something like that had happened? Well, I felt the same way. I had no idea what had happened, and I excused myself, went home to try and get it on, and I still have the diary in which I drew the figure to take around and ask the people, and they said, "This is all yours." That was August of 1970. I had been admitted to graduate school, but I'm not saying my learning was finished, but the type of learning that I wanted was not in any school in the world. And so I deferred my admission and took off on a quest, not knowing that there was an actual being, physical being. 6 months later, as God would have it, following that voice that had been calling me, I come face to face with the one who had appeared to me in the vision, outside a small village north of Delhi, south of Delhi. Now what would you say? Now I was stunned. His name was Singh. And he looked at me and he said, "You're a student. Have you found God in your books yet?" And we both laughed. He said, "Why should it be so easy? Why do you think it should be so easy to find God when it takes 30 or 40 years to become a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer? Here, you take this Nam. This is your first lesson, and you're way behind in your studies. Tomorrow, God's going to come and give you your final, and you go and you cram. You recite this prayer like you're cramming for your final. And you pray to God that I'm on this quest, and please bless me." And so, everyone who tells me what Nam is and what Nam should recite and everything else, I thank you very much. I've had this debate with Jetta de Bande, Jide, one of the Nam men, the Nam Rea, and Apna Patti, Amritsar de Lage Patti Jira, by Bidi Chandra Pend, A Nahanga Tarna Dal, the truck to Utir. बैठ के नवा शहर ते लंगे हो गमादन मनाया अनंत साहब मैं I've had plenty of chance to debate intellectual everything, but this Nam goes on within me. I can't get rid of it no matter what I do. It's a Kunkala Satnam Sirivaigu, and it's these words which I had never heard before started going on inside my head. I couldn't stop it. My mind was that playground on which Nam was destroying my ego. It's not gone yet, but I just want to say that we're in Silicon Valley, in a place of artificial intelligence. I was at the Origin Symposium. I love science and stuff. I was at the Origin Symposium with Dawkins and Davies and Ventnor and Johansson and the string theory guys and everybody else. And they were talking about intelligence, the search for intelligent life, and I basically said, I think it's going to be harder to find intelligent life on this planet than it is to find it in outer space. And that's still my submission. The point is very simple, that when we talk about virtual reality, I develop curriculum for kids, I try and give them hope. And what I say is very simple, is virtual reality is not a video game. Virtual reality is everything we see outside. The stealing, the injustice, the disrespect for women, for people of color, for anything. That's all man-made. It's virtual reality. It's what our gurus called mitlog. And we are the avatars, except the gurus didn't call us avatars. Do you know what he called us? Sikhs. We are Sikhs who have the power to change reality. Once we get the vision and get rid of our egos, once we get rid of our egos and start to look and feel that spiritual power within us, there's nothing that can't change. And for what a Sikh offers is a narrative, is a new and constant, consistent, eternal sense of truth, that there is stability. There is one level in which morality and justice and goodness, in which compassion can in fact prevail. And isn't that something which would be worth representing with a turban on our heads? Or not cutting our hair, if we can verbalize it, if we can say that this is what it stands for, might our children feel proud to be part of a movement which will bring change, needed change in the world, without asking somebody to change their religion. I just want to give you a few quips. You know, some people say, oh, that's Gurbani, we have to learn Gurbani and everything else. Anybody do Facebook? Come on. be honest. Anybody do LinkedIn to leverage their contacts business-wise? Can you keep up with all your friends on Facebook? At some point they put Messenger in. You know, I can't keep up. And then suddenly I said to Jigin, oh my God. Jaka meet sajana hai samia. Tis jan ko kaho ka ki kami. Who is the friend that we should make? We can't keep up. We want to embrace all these worldly friends, but how much time are we spending Jakamit Sajana, who has all the power and all the love, which frankly is in everybody, which is the same light and friendship. And so if we cultivate that friend, then all our friends will love us. Maybe even our enemies might start to love us, because he's ruler over their minds too. So little things like that, when any of us start saying, well, Gurbani is a deep philosophy, it's endless, it's an ocean. But remember, Guru Nanak and the Guru spoke in vernacular. They used the metaphors of churning butter. They used the metaphor, the local vernacular. We can do the same. Make it interesting, make it understandable, but the bottom line is, within us is that power to transcend an ego and Udehari Kura Apni Diohari Sadwar. Jin Manas ke devte kiye kart na lage var. I don't know how many people sit in Asa Divar, but in Govindan, you just absorb it. You're up at 1:30 in the morning, Nitname starts at 3, Asa Divar starts at 4, and it just goes. And so it just becomes part of your blood. It's not a matter of studying. So I've got 2 minutes to wrap up, right? Please allow me a few more than 2 minutes, but I will wrap up. And so that moves us to the sense of within religion. And before the slide came up, I spoke to it. That the issue is that within Guru Granth Sahib, it's very funny, before the 400th anniversary, Sikh leadership delegate came to Babaji and said, and they were talking to Babaji, and one of them was really upset. He said, Babaji, every single religious scripture talks about their prophet and their Messiah alone. Why did our gurus put the names of other prophets and messiahs? Why was in our scripture was there Gobind and Hari and Narayan and that? Why would they do that to us? And Babaji laughed. And he said, because they knew that there would be Tware Varge Khatak Bande. They sound serious. And then they wanted it to be clear that Vishal, the Guru Granth Sahib, cosmic, universal for everybody. But that does make a difference, a huge difference. I was at a conference where this Tibetan Lama was one of the keynotes, and I'm walking out, and his whole entourage is coming up. And he stops, Satsi Kal Sadaji. And I'm, you know, you have a spiritual connection, but this, you know, so all his entourage stops and goes, who's this guy? And he said, you know, we Tibetans love Guru Nanak. And this is 20 years the first time I'd heard it. He said, on my way to Ladakh, there is a holy site, a holy rock where Guru Nanak had left his imprint. And all of us would stop and pray there and do butter sculpture. We'd put butter, pray, which is how we pray. And it was tradition. And I hadn't been back to Ladakh in many years, and I went last year. And I have to tell you that when I came to the rock, it was now enclosed. And Sikhs had taken it over. And they make us take off our shoes. And we can't put butter on the rock anymore. And so I'm sorry to say that most Tibetans just don't bother. They don't stop anymore. And they've lost this deep reverence, or ability to express their reverence for Guru Nanak. So are we talking about Jagat Guru Baba, or are we talking about Guru Nanak, our Guru? And that came into a talk that you can't wall up the light. And the problem with clergy all over the world is they try to wall up the light and try to say it's ours and try to say only by our ritual and only by following our way can you get there. And the beauty of Guru Nanak and the Gurus, they're iconoclasts and broke it all down. And yet we're going and building it up again. So that's my piece on the walls between religions. Walls between community. I'm going to get to another slide. After September 11th, our community group in Southern USA was the first, and I wish I had some of the kids doing the PowerPoints for me because my slides stink. But 4 kids got drunk and thought that we were followers of bin Laden and torched our place of worship. 100-year-old farmhouse, flames shooting out of the roof, exactly where Guru Granth Sahib, Dasam Granth Prakash were. We surveyed, that's what the house looked like. I mean, you can see through it, it was totally gutted, and yet the light's coming through the window. But more than that, not one drop of water, the tons of water poured. Forget the fire, not one drop of water damaged Granth Sahib. A little bit on the edges, and the very next day it was carried out and we did Prakash. Triumph. So don't ask me theory about the power of Guru Granth Sahib. I have seen the power of Guru Granth Sahib to triumph over evil. And this was a column in Belief Net, which a friend of our minister brought her daughter. And she, when she heard that the scripture had survived, she said, "Mom, that means that God must really be present here. Shouldn't we allow other people to experience the presence of God? Shouldn't we ourselves understand that wherever Prakash, wherever the Naam and Kirtan go, God is present? And allow them to understand it. Not only that, but we went public with a powerful statement of forgiveness, which galvanized the entire community, and at their transformed their lives. So the headlines were, understand that that girl 1 year before was one of the arsonists. The power of forgiveness transformed her life so much that today she brought her mother and her baby to celebrate the anniversary with us. There's another part of history. They said, if only we'd known your story. And so that's sort of how my work in terms of stories and sharing stories came. But there's another story I want to share with you, which I don't have time to go through all the slides, but basically there's a missing link. There's a missing link in the story of Guru Granth Sahib. The missing link, and it happens to come through Baba Sri Chand and the Udasi Sampradaya. Baba Sri Chand's birthday we're actually celebrating today. Congratulations. The myth that was created by British-inspired people to undermine the Panth, to divide the Udasis and to divide, yes, Nankana Sahib was British-backed villain. But the Udasis carried the message and the teaching so much so that I have a board over there, I won't take much time. But has anybody ever been to Goindwal Sahib?
Yeah.
Next to Goindwal Sahib, I'll bet you haven't been, there's a tiny little Gurdwara which was Guru Armand Das Ji's personal residence. It's called Chubara Sahib. Anybody ever been to Chubara Sahib? This place is, what you have on the left is the coronation of Guru Ram Das Ji by, with Baba Buddha putting the tilak by Gurdas and standing Guru Amar Das, and over to the right on the ground, that's Baba Mohanji, Guru Amar Das Ji's son, who he dedicated to serve Baba Sri Chand. He is sitting in Udasi Beg with his long hair on Mrikshala, present in the court. That is where you have Chabara named after that room, which is Chabara, where Guru Arjan Dev Ji stood and said, Mon Teri Uchamando. It's all written right there, and that on the right is the Palki Sahib, where the original Sanchis were taken by Guru Arjan Dev Ji back to Amritsar. And yet our scholars who, for whatever reason, want to say that's all myth, it isn't myth. This is also the birthplace of Guru Arjan Dev Ji. This is where Bibi Pani held her and got the commitment from her father, Guru Amar Das, that the Guru Gadi would stay with Sodhi Vans. This is the root and the source of not only Guru Granth Sahib, but the whole future of the Sikh Panth. And there are two ways to do research. One is look at scholarly work and try and write your version for whatever reason. The other is like archaeologists, like go find an extant site which is standing there and show it. And so I just thought it might be useful to share this with you in terms of celebrating the sense of Guru Granth Sahib. And so what would, if we break down the barriers, what could be done? All the young people in this room know the Beatles song, Imagine, right? And so 50 years at a time when John Lennon wrote Imagine That, Baba Virsa Singh was starting Gobind Singh. People really don't know Baba Virsa Singh, they don't know Gobind Singh. But we're talking about how to spread the message. Well, in Gobind Singh, like Maharaj Ranjit Singh, Babaji built a mosque of not a little corner, that huge mosque, for the poor Muslims in the area who were being slaughtered, so they have a safe place to pray. He built a place for Jesus. He built a place of what you may call heaven, which is, some people can't understand it. These are eternal sacred fires. This is the sense there's even a place of the Shema, of the Jews. So people can experience the divine in different forms under the aegis of Guru Granth Sahib. You saw that. It's not different. It's the aegis of Guru Granth Sahib. And to work, to be out in the fields working himself, I took that picture, and feed people, make them work, help them work. And so that's what could happen. You can put people to work, you can affirm everybody's faith, and so where do you go? Well, as far as I'm concerned, we go into, Inder, do you mind my plagiarizing? We go from here into Charli Kala. Thank you. And that subsequent hukum hai Guru Maniyo Granth. It's up to us. The Guru is clear. The Guru is clear. But what are we going to do? It's up to us. And just a closing note. See that? I know you can't recognize that. That little guy up there. But this was, I think I spent 6 years of my life preaching throughout Punjab. I had my column in a Kali Patrika in a jeep, and village to village in Khalsa school. And so, if you remember a seminal event, which the 1978 All India Kali Conference in Ludhiana, because of the Nunkari problem, which was huge. Everything was blowing up. I had already gone back to America, but I was called back to speak at this All India Kali Conference. Front row, you have, that's Tulwandi sitting there, Torah sitting there, Hachand Singh and Badal, Bibi Nadet Kaur, and Baba Nihal Singh and Tarunadal. Little guys in the punk. But in the middle, another little guy stood up. And this little guy who knew nothing except ki log keh rahe kisi ki nu khatra hai. The whole nara, jani aaj Which one of you on the panel said, I don't know whether 20 years from now there'll be a Sikh? I guarantee you there'll be Sikhs. And there'll be more Sikhs. What they look like, I can't guarantee you. But there will always be Sikhs, as there will always be the Guru. And so what I said that day was very simple, and I still say it today. कि मैं पिन पिन फिरदा है ते जिते मैं जांदे मैं सोंदियां ताड़ियां कोलों कि जिस दा साहिब दादा होए किसनू मान सके कोई कि मानु साडे दात्रियासी उसते सोए. And yet here we're sitting here, a million of us saying कि सीखी नू पता है. मैं क्या सीखी एक अथाल सच्चाई, the little I know, सीखी एक अथाल सच्चाई ते सीखी नू खतरा खड़ी नहीं पै सकदा, ते खड़ी नहीं पै सकदा. I'm sorry, लेकिन सानू खतरा पै सकदा. We सानू खतरा पै सकदा जदों असीं सीखी नहीं चलदे. आज भी यही सुनिया कि सारे गुरु इन्ना महान, इन्ना वड्डा है. We just spend a little time getting rid of all this garbage and tuning in. Then he will bring forth through each of us such a beautiful change and a beautiful message and a beautiful story that the world has been waiting for. Don't keep it, it's a beautiful Gurdwara, but don't keep the message in the Gurdwara. Take it to the streets, be proud of it. There's nothing like it in the world. Sorry I took too much time. Bye, Khalsa. Oh no!
Thank you, Ram Singh ji. It's such a delightful presentation. You really touched our hearts. I have one question here. Ram, what do you bring from Jewish tradition that connects with the Sikh teachings?
There is, how can I put it? God, there's one God. His prophets and his, whether we call it prophet, Messiah, Guru, Pir, the message is the same. The message is the same. It isn't a matter of the difference in the message. What I found was someone who embodied everything they were telling about in the Bible. I came to the feet of a holy person, of someone who could interpret, who could hear the order. If you read, what you bring from the Jewish tradition is very simple. If you read the Old Testament, the prophets would get up in the morning and God would tell them, go to such and such a village and there you'll meet so-and-so and you tell so-and-so this. And Jonah tried to escape from that, got challenged from the whale, but you read Isaiah. The point was that God was immanent. What you learn from the Jewish or any tradition is that God was always present. That's the whole essence of Sikhi. Satguru mera sabha sada na ave na jai. Oh, Nasipur ke sab mere asamai. And so to be able to be connected with everything that I'd learned, and my parents were kind enough to teach me at great expense, was a great privilege. And if anybody has a Jewish friend or anybody else who wants to talk to me about talking points, I'd be happy to do that.
Ralph, just a quick thing. I have a couple friends that are rabbis, and they think Sikhi is the only religion that is equal in all aspects to them.
The Christians who do too, everybody does.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's have a jayakara for Ram Singh ji. Bole so nihal.
Sat Sri Akal.